I've always believed that I was a patient man, not the kind to jump to conclusions, not the type to overreact. I took things in stride, kept my emotions in check, and never let little annoyances get the best of me. But that all changed the day I realized how much I had been manipulated, lied to, and taken for granted. It wasn't the shouting matches, the cheating, or the obvious signs that something was off. It was the small, quiet moments when she'd look at me with that little smirk, like she knew something I didn't. I thought I was just being paranoid, but deep down, I always had this nagging feeling that I wasn't getting the full truth. That feeling started to grow louder. It began one evening, after dinner. We had just finished eating, and for the first time in a while, I wasn't tired. I didn't have work the next day, and I thought it would be nice if we could just sit down, relax, and watch something on TV. But as soon as I suggested it, she gave me that half smile, the one that told me she was already planning something else in her head. It wasn't a smile of affection or happiness, but something cold, calculating, like she was 2 steps ahead of me. You know what? I think I'm going to head out for a bit. I feel like I need to clear my head, she said, standing up abruptly. I watched her as she grabbed her bag, her keys, and then that's when it hit me. It wasn't just the fact that she wanted to leave, it was the way she had been acting lately. Over the past couple of months, she had become distant. She'd come home later and later, her phone glued to her hand. The conversations we had were getting shorter, her excuses for being busy getting more creative. But this time, something about it felt different. Something about the way she said it made me realize that I was no longer a priority in her life. Maybe I had known it for a while, but I didn't want to admit it. I was never the type of person to make a scene, to accuse her of things without solid proof. I always thought that the truth would come out eventually, and maybe it would. But that night, I realized I couldn't just wait for it to come to me anymore. Okay, I said, standing up from the couch. You want to clear your head? Go ahead. But if you're going out, I think it's time we talk about some things. She froze, her hand still on the door, and I could see the moment of hesitation in her eyes. It wasn't the reaction I expected. I expected her to get defensive or angry, but instead, she seemed almost cautious. That's when it clicked. She wasn't just worried about the conversation we were about to have. She was worried about losing control. Talk about what? She asked, her voice dripping with uncertainty now. You know exactly what, I replied calmly. You've been acting distant, avoiding me, like there's something you don't want me to find out. So let's have that conversation. Right now. She took a deep breath, clearly trying to gather herself, but her body language betrayed her. She wasn't confident anymore. She was on the defensive. I'm not sure what you mean. You're overthinking everything, she said, her voice now tight, but her eyes darting toward the door like she couldn't wait to leave. I just need some space. We're fine. I could feel the tension in the air, but I didn't back down. For once, I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into thinking everything was okay. I had been blind for too long. You've been fine for months now, I said. But here's the thing, I'm not okay with it anymore. She gave me a look like I had just broken some unspoken rule. Her eyes widened slightly, and then, in an instant, the mask of control slipped. The smirk that had been there earlier faded, and I saw the true frustration in her face. She didn't want to confront the truth. You're being ridiculous, she said, her voice now sharp. Why are you doing this right now? It's not like. I interrupted her before she could finish. No, I'm not going to be the one sitting here pretending everything's fine. You've been lying to me, and I'm done with it. She stood there, motionless for a few seconds, and I could tell that she wasn't expecting this. I wasn't angry, I wasn't yelling, I wasn't throwing things. I was calm, collected, and matter of fact. And that, I think, was what rattled her the most. The silence between us grew heavy, thick with tension. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. But she had underestimated me. She thought I was just some pushover, someone who would let her walk all over me. I'm not asking for permission, I said, locking eyes with her. But you're not going anywhere tonight. We're going to talk about this, and I'm not going to pretend like everything's fine anymore. The truth's coming out, one way or another. She opened her mouth to protest, but before she could speak, I continued. You've been seeing someone else, haven't you? I asked, my voice still calm, almost eerie in its tranquility. For the first time, she flinched. I saw it in her eyes. The panic, the realization that I knew something, that I had figured it out before she had a chance to hide it. She swallowed hard, but the silence between us was louder than anything she could say. She opened her mouth again, but now, she wasn't sure what to say. The power was shifting, and for the first time in months, I wasn't the one with doubt in my eyes. The silence that hung between us was deafening. For the first time in months, I could hear the truth, the weight of everything she had been hiding. She stood there, her eyes darting everywhere but to mine, trying to find a way out of this moment, a way to pretend it wasn't happening. But it was happening. She was cornered. And for once, I wasn't going to let her twist this to her advantage. "You think I'm blind, don't you?" I asked, my voice steady. It wasn't a question meant for her. It was more of a statement, a realization that I had finally woken up. "You've been playing me this entire time, and I've just been too stupid to see it." She swallowed hard, the panic in her eyes growing more evident. For a moment, I saw her hesitate, like she wasn't sure whether to lie her way out of it or face the consequences. But then she did what I'd expected. She tried to play it cool, to laugh it off as if it wasn't a big deal. "Walt, this is ridiculous," she said, forcing a nervous smile. "You're overthinking everything. You're acting crazy. There's nothing going on." I couldn't help but laugh, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was bitter, cold. The kind of laugh you let out when you realize how far someone has gone to deceive you. "No, Lena, this isn't me overthinking. This is me finally seeing you for who you really are." Her face twitched slightly at my words. She wasn't used to me speaking to her like this, like I actually had some control over the situation. The look on her face, that mix of confusion and anger, was almost satisfying. But I didn't want satisfaction, I wanted the truth. And I was done asking for it. I took a step closer to her, my eyes never leaving hers. "You've been sneaking around behind my back, haven't you? With him. Evan, was it?" For a brief moment, I saw her panic. It was like a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a recognition that I knew far more than she thought I did. That name, the one she had so desperately tried to hide, was now out in the open. And she couldn't take it back. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. That was when I knew I had her. She wasn't even trying to deny it anymore. She was caught, plain and simple. The mask had slipped, and there was no turning back. "I knew it," I said softly, my voice quieter now, but the words hit like a punch. "I've known for weeks, Lena. The late nights, the business trips, the way you always forgot to tell me where you were going. And let's not even talk about the texts you've been sending." "Huh? I'm not blind. I can see the way you look at him when you think I'm not paying attention." She stood there, frozen, caught between trying to make an excuse and trying to make a run for it. I could see her weighing her options, and for a moment, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then I remembered everything. The late nights, the lies, the subtle manipulation. How she had made me feel like I was the one at fault every time I questioned her. How she had made me second-guess my own feelings just to keep me in line. "You know," I said, almost conversationally, "it's funny. I used to think I wasn't good enough. That maybe I wasn't doing enough to make you happy. But now I realize, it was never me, was it? It was you all along. You were just too selfish to care about anything but yourself." Her face flushed a deep red, but still, she couldn't bring herself to admit the truth. She couldn't say the words that would make it real. Instead, she took a step back, shaking her head as if trying to convince herself that this was all a misunderstanding. "Walt, this is insane. You don't know what you're talking about. We've been together for years. You can't just—" "No, Lena," I interrupted, my tone sharp. "You've been lying to me for months. You thought I wouldn't catch on, didn't you? But here's the thing. I'm done being the fool in this story. I'm not going to keep pretending everything's okay. Not when I know what's really going on." I watched her for a few moments longer, her face a mixture of guilt and frustration. But the guilt didn't seem to bother her as much as the frustration. She wasn't angry at herself. She was angry at me for exposing her, for making her face the reality of what she had been doing. "Are you really just going to throw everything away like this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly now, though she was trying to keep her composure. "We've been through so much together. You can't just decide that this is the end." I could feel the anger rising in me, but I kept it under control. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into feeling sorry for her. I wasn't going to fall for the same tricks again. "You made that decision a long time ago, Lena," I said, my voice low and steady. "Not me. You chose this when you started sneaking around, when you decided that lying to me was easier than facing the truth. I'm just here to finish what you started. I could see the shift in her eyes. The realization that she wasn't going to talk her way out of this. That she couldn't play the victim anymore. It was the first time in a long while that I saw her without the power she had been wielding over me for months. For a brief second, I almost felt a sense of satisfaction. But I wasn't going to let that be the end of it. I wasn't going to let her off the hook just because she was finally caught. I wanted more than that. You want to leave, don't you? I asked, my voice suddenly cold. But you're afraid. You're afraid because you know, deep down, that I'm done. I'm not going to chase after you. I'm not going to beg you to stay. Her eyes widened at my words, and for the first time, she seemed to lose her composure completely. I wasn't the one she had to worry about anymore. You know what? I continued, my voice calm again. I'm done. Your things will be outside in an hour. You can leave if you want, but don't ever come back. I turned away from her and started heading toward the bedroom. I didn't need to say anything more. The truth was out, and now, she had to face the consequences of everything she'd done. As I walked into the bedroom, I could feel her eyes burning into my back. I had expected her to argue, to throw a tantrum, or to try to manipulate me one last time. But nothing came. The house was silent, the only sound the soft shuffle of my steps on the hardwood floor. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt this calm. There was no anger in me, no rage, just a sense of finality. I was done. And the crazy thing was, it felt good. I opened the closet and started pulling her things down from the hangers. Her favorite jacket, the one she had worn on so many dates with me, the one I had bought for her last Christmas. I folded it carefully and dropped it into a duffel bag, the familiar weight of it now feeling like an anchor. I didn't care about the material things anymore. This wasn't about clothes or gifts. This was about my pride, my self-respect, and finally walking away from the emotional wreckage she had been dragging me through. As I packed her things, I couldn't help but think back to the times when I thought everything was perfect between us. The dinners, the trips, the laughter, the promises she had made. Promises that now felt hollow. She had been so good at hiding her deceit, so skilled at making me believe in her lies. But now, it was all unraveling. And she couldn't stop it. I could hear her pacing outside the door, her footsteps quick and anxious. I wasn't sure what she was doing. Maybe she was trying to figure out what to say next, or maybe she was trying to come up with a new excuse, but I didn't care. I wasn't interested in hearing it anymore. I was done listening. Finally, I finished packing up her things and walked back into the living room. She was standing by the door, her back straight, but her shoulders were tense. She looked like a woman on the verge of breaking, but at the same time, there was this strange air of defiance in her posture. It was as if she was still trying to control the situation, to make me the bad guy. But I wasn't having it. Are you serious right now? She asked, her voice tight, almost like she was choking on the words. You're just going to kick me out like this? After everything we've been through? I met her gaze and felt that familiar sting in my chest. But it wasn't pain. It was anger. Anger at myself for letting her do this to me for so long. Anger at her for thinking she could manipulate me into believing her lies. You made this choice, Lena, I said evenly, my tone cold. Not me. You've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back, and you thought I wouldn't notice. But I did, and I'm not going to let you make me feel guilty for it. Her lips parted, and I saw that look again, the one of realization. She knew I wasn't going to back down. She knew this was the end, but there was still a part of her that seemed desperate to convince me otherwise, as if she thought I might change my mind. Walt, please, she said, her voice shaking now. This is crazy. You can't just throw everything away. You're my everything. You mean everything to me. Don't you see that? Her words were a far cry from the ones she had been saying before, the ones filled with indifference and distance. Now, she was trying to cling to me, to pull me back in with the very same lies she had been telling me all along. But I wasn't going to fall for it. Not anymore. I'm not your everything, Lena, I replied, shaking my head. I was never your everything. I was just the guy who was there when it was convenient. But I'm done being that guy. I grabbed the duffel bag from the bed and walked toward the door. She followed me, her voice rising in panic. Wait, please. Don't do this. I swear, I'll make it right. I can fix this. I'll stop seeing him. I'll do whatever you want. But the words were empty now. They were just desperate pleas, the kind of promises that had been broken 1,000 times before. I had heard them all before. Every time she promised to change, every time she told me she was sorry. But there was no more room for apologies. There was no more space in my heart for empty promises. You should have thought about that before you started sneaking around behind my back, I said, my voice final. Don't bother asking me to forgive you. Don't bother trying to talk me out of this. It's over, and I'm not going to let you drag me back into this mess. I opened the door and set the bag down outside. Her face fell, the mask slipping completely. For the first time in months, I saw vulnerability. Real, raw vulnerability. It wasn't the confident, manipulative Lena I had been dealing with. It was the scared, panicked version of her, the one who realized she had lost control. But even as she stood there, looking like she was about to break down, I didn't feel the urge to comfort her. I didn't feel bad for her. I felt nothing but relief. I'm sorry, Walt, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. I had already said everything I needed to say. I'm done, I said, turning away from her. Goodbye, Lena. I walked out, leaving her standing there, frozen in place. As I stepped into the cold night air, I felt the weight of everything lift off my shoulders. It was over, and as much as I thought I would feel anger, sadness, or regret, all I felt was freedom. For the first time in years, I was finally free. Free from the lies, free from the manipulation, free from the woman who had stolen so much of my life. And as I walked away from that door, I knew I had made the right choice. I wasn't going to let her keep me in that toxic cycle anymore. And it felt damn good. I didn't look back. The door closed behind me with a soft thud, but the sound felt like a weight being lifted off my chest. I took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp night air, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity. It was like stepping out of a fog I didn't even know I had been in. Lena was gone, and with her, the lies, the manipulation, and the weight of the relationship that had been draining me for far too long. The streets were quiet, the only sound the distant hum of cars in the distance, the cool breeze brushing against my skin. I walked aimlessly for a while, my mind still racing, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. My emotions were a whirlwind. Relief, anger, regret. But above all, there was a strange sense of freedom, as if I had just shed a skin I didn't even know was there. I kept walking, not sure where I was going, but knowing that I needed to get away. I needed space, time to think. Everything I had believed in, everything I thought was real, was shattered. Lena had played me for so long, and I had let her. But now, as I walked down the empty street, I knew it was over. As I rounded the corner, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated for a moment, already knowing who it was. I pulled it out and saw her name on the screen. Lena. She was calling. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me, a mix of curiosity and something else, made me swipe the screen and put the phone to my ear. Walt. Her voice came through, sounding like she had been crying. Please, just listen to me. Don't do this. We can fix everything. I was silent for a few moments, just listening to the desperation in her voice. It was the same desperation I had heard 1,000 times before, every time she got caught, every time she had to apologize for something she had done. It was the same broken record, playing in my ear. But this time, it didn't have the same effect. This time, I wasn't going to fall for it. Lena, I said calmly, my voice firm, but without the anger I expected. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about fixing things. It's not about apologies. It's about trust, and you've broken that. You've been lying to me for months, and I'm done. This isn't some fight we're going to get over. This is the end, and I'm okay with that. She was quiet for a moment, and for the briefest second, I thought she might accept it, might finally let go of the control she had tried so hard to hold on to. But then she spoke again, and the familiar manipulation crept back into her voice. Walt, please. I know I've made mistakes, but we're stronger than this. I need you. You know I do. The words stung, but I didn't let them faze me. You don't need me, Lena. You just need someone to keep you comfortable, someone to keep you in your routine. But I'm not that guy anymore. I'm not the guy who's going to sit around and pretend like everything's fine when it's not. I deserve better than that. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, and then I heard a sharp intake of breath. I love you, Walt, she said quietly, her voice breaking. I really do. Please don't do this. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. If you really loved me, you wouldn't have done any of this. You wouldn't have lied. You wouldn't have kept things from me. You wouldn't have made me question myself. But you did, and now you've got to live with that. I could hear her breathing heavily, her sobs just beneath the surface, but I was beyond the point of caring. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't heartbroken either. I was just done. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision I had made. You can keep calling me, keep begging if you want. But I'm not coming back. I've made my choice. And you made yours a long time ago. I hung up before she could say anything else. I didn't need to hear it. I didn't need her to tell me she was sorry. I didn't need her to tell me she was going to change. The only thing I needed now was peace. I walked for hours that night, clearing my head, making sure that the decision I had made wasn't something I would regret. I knew it wouldn't be. I knew that the moment I took control of my life again, the moment I stopped letting her dictate my worth, I would be better off. And as the night turned into morning, I realized just how much I had been holding on to the past, to a version of her that no longer existed. And it wasn't just her that I was letting go of. It was the version of me that had let her manipulate me for so long. By the time I made it home, the sun was rising. I stood outside my apartment, the cool morning air still fresh with dew. I hadn't realized how long I'd been walking, but it didn't matter. I was done. No more lies. No more games. No more wondering if I was good enough. I had been good enough all along. And the woman who had taken advantage of that was now nothing more than a memory. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I felt something shift in me. It was like a weight had been lifted from my chest, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. And in that moment, I realized that the best part of all of this wasn't just that I was free from her. It was that I was free to become the person I had been before her. The person I had almost forgotten. The next few days felt like a blur, but in the best possible way. There was no drama, no late-night calls, no text with half-hearted apologies and empty promises. Lena was gone, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't have to constantly look over my shoulder or wonder if she was telling the truth. I could breathe again. I could finally think clearly, without the cloud of doubt hanging over me. At first, I thought it might be hard, living without her. I had been so accustomed to the chaos, the emotional roller coaster. She had kept me on my toes, always feeding me just enough attention to keep me hooked, while simultaneously pulling away when I needed her the most. It had been exhausting. But now that she was gone, I realized how much energy I had been wasting, how much of myself I had given up to someone who didn't deserve it. I took some time to focus on myself, something I hadn't done in years. I started going to the gym again, picking up hobbies I had long since abandoned, and catching up with friends who had faded into the background during the relationship. It was amazing how much more energy I had when I wasn't constantly trying to prove myself to someone who was never really interested in me to begin with. But even though I felt better, there was still a lingering part of me that couldn't help but wonder what Lena was doing. Had she already moved on to someone else? Was she pretending like nothing ever happened, going back to her life as though I had never existed? The idea of her with someone else didn't sting the way I thought it would. In fact, it almost felt like a relief. If she was happy, if she had found someone who was willing to put up with her games, then good for her. She had made her choice, and now, I was making mine. Then, one evening, the unexpected happened. I was sitting at a local bar with a couple of friends, enjoying a drink and laughing at something stupid one of them had said when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't even need to look at it to know who it was. Lena. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me glance at the screen. It was a text, and in the short time it took for me to unlock my phone, I saw that it wasn't just any text. It was an apology. Walt, I made a huge mistake. I'm sorry for everything. Please, let's talk. I stared at the message for a long time. My heart didn't race like it used to when I'd get one of her texts. There was no urge to drop everything and rush back to her. No, this time, I just felt indifferent. I had spent so much time hoping she would finally come around, but now that she was offering an apology, it felt hollow. Like she was apologizing for the sake of her own peace of mind, not because she truly understood what she had done to me. I took a sip of my drink, considering my options. I could ignore it, block her number, and keep moving forward. Or, I could engage, see if she was finally ready to admit her mistakes. But honestly, I wasn't sure what good that would do. At this point, I wasn't interested in salvaging something that had been broken for so long. I wasn't interested in hearing the same tired excuses she had fed me for months. Instead of replying right away, I set my phone down on the table and focused on the conversation with my friends. Lena had made her choice, and I had made mine. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had already moved on. I didn't need her validation anymore. I didn't need her approval. I had built myself back up, and no matter what she said or did, I wasn't going to let her pull me back into the chaos. The next morning, I woke up and saw another message from Lena. It was a longer one this time, more emotional. I could almost hear the tears in her words, the desperation in the way she begged for forgiveness. But I just couldn't bring myself to care. In a weird way, it felt almost pathetic, like she was trying so hard to keep me in her life, even though she had already destroyed everything between us. I miss you, Walt. I made a huge mistake, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, let's talk. I need to see you. The message made me laugh, but not in a funny way. It was like watching a person who had run out of moves, grasping for anything they could to regain control. But the problem was, the power was no longer in her hands. It had shifted, and as I read those words, I realized something important. She wasn't trying to apologize for the hurt she caused me. She wasn't apologizing for the lies or the betrayal. She was apologizing because she missed the comfort of having me around. She missed the stability I had provided, the emotional support she had taken for granted. And now, that was gone. I didn't reply to her messages. I couldn't. Because even though she was apologizing, even though she was crying out for me to come back, I knew the truth. It was all just another manipulation. She wasn't sorry for what she did to me. She was sorry for the fact that I had finally seen through her act. Days passed, and I kept living my life. I stopped thinking about Lena as much. It wasn't that I didn't care, it was that I had learned to care about myself more. I focused on my work, I spent more time with friends who supported me, and I even started to date again. Nothing serious, just small, fun moments that reminded me of who I was before all of this. One afternoon, as I was walking down the street, I ran into Lena. She was standing outside a cafe, her eyes wide with surprise when she saw me. She looked different, thinner, more tired, like the weight of everything had finally caught up with her. For a moment, I thought she might cry, but instead, she just stood there, looking at me like she didn't know what to say. "Walt," she said softly, almost hesitantly. I've been thinking a lot about everything. I know I messed up, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything." I looked at her for a long time, studying her face, but I didn't feel any of the emotions I thought I would. There was no anger, no sadness, just a quiet sense of finality. "You can say sorry all you want, Lena," I said, my voice steady. "But the truth is, you don't deserve my forgiveness. And you don't get to make me feel guilty for choosing myself." She looked at me, stunned. But this time, I didn't feel the urge to comfort her. I didn't feel bad for her. She had made her choice, and so had I. And with that, I walked away, leaving her standing there. The past was behind me now, and I was moving forward, on my own terms. The next few weeks passed by with a strange sense of calmness. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly in control of my life. Lena's messages kept coming, but I stopped checking them after a while. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to reel me back in, hoping I would take the bait. But I had learned my lesson. I had seen her manipulations for what they were, and I wasn't going to let her drag me back into her web of lies. I didn't need closure from her. I had already closed that chapter in my life, and it was time to move on. I focused more on myself during those days. I threw myself into work, picking up extra projects and making sure that I was building my career the way I had always dreamed. I started hanging out with my friends more, going to bars, playing sports, and having fun without the weight of a toxic relationship hanging over me. For the first time in years, I was starting to feel like myself again. I was no longer the guy who had to apologize for his existence, the guy who constantly felt like he was walking on eggshells, afraid of setting her off. I was free. It wasn't easy at first. There were moments when I thought about Lena, when I wondered if she was still trying to manipulate me from afar. There were nights when I missed the familiarity of her voice, the way she used to smile at me, or the false sense of comfort she had provided. But those moments didn't last. They were fleeting, and every time they crept up, I reminded myself of everything she had put me through, the gaslighting, the lies, the constant emotional roller coaster. It wasn't love. It was control, and I refused to go back to that. One evening, I found myself at the same bar I had been at the night Lena first texted me. It was a regular hangout spot for me and my friends, and tonight, I was just looking to unwind. The drinks flowed, laughter filled the air, and for a while, I didn't even think about her. But then, as I turned my head toward the entrance, I saw a familiar face. It was Lena. She stood in the doorway, her eyes scanning the room. But the moment they landed on me, her entire demeanor changed. Her face, which had once been full of confidence and control, now looked uncertain. Her eyes widened when she saw me sitting at the bar, and for a brief moment, I could see the panic that washed over her. I didn't move. I didn't feel the need to. I didn't even flinch. The last time I saw her, I had walked away without a second thought. Tonight, I wasn't going to let her disrupt my peace. She took a step forward, but then stopped herself. I could see the wheels turning in her head, like she was trying to figure out whether to approach me or not. After a moment, she gathered herself, took a deep breath, and walked over to where I was sitting. "Walt," she said softly, her voice unsteady. I didn't expect to see you here." I looked at her, my expression neutral, not giving anything away. "Funny," I replied. "I didn't expect to see you here either." She swallowed, clearly uncomfortable under my gaze. "I know I've messed up," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you." I took a sip of my drink, the ice clinking softly in the glass. "You keep saying that, Lena," I said slowly, my tone calm but firm. "But you never change. You say you're sorry, you beg for forgiveness, but you never take responsibility for what you did. You just want to fix things when it's convenient for you. Well, it's not convenient for me anymore." She looked at me, her face contorting in disbelief. "You're just going to throw everything away? After everything we've been through?" I shook my head, my eyes never leaving hers. "It's not throwing everything away, Lena. It's finally letting go of something that should have ended a long time ago. You were never the person I thought you were. And I was never the person I thought I was when I was with you." Her face softened for a moment, as if she was processing my words. I could see the tears beginning to well up in her eyes, but I didn't feel any sympathy. Not anymore. The woman who had stood before me just a few months ago, the one who had manipulated me into doubting myself at every turn, was not the same woman I was looking at now. This was someone who was desperate for control, desperate to make herself feel better, but it wasn't working. She wasn't going to get to me anymore. "I loved you, Walt," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I still love you. I don't know what happened to us." I wanted to tell her that it wasn't love. I wanted to tell her that what we had wasn't healthy, that she had never truly loved me. She had only loved the idea of me. But I didn't say that. I didn't need to. "I'm not going to do this with you again," I said, finally standing up. "I'm done. You're not the person I thought you were. And I'm not the person I was when I was with you." She opened her mouth to say something, but I held up a hand, stopping her. "No, we've had this conversation too many times. You've had your chances. And now it's over. For good." I turned away from her and walked out of the bar, not looking back. There was nothing left to say. I didn't need her closure. I didn't need to hear her excuses or her apologies. I had already moved on. The moment I closed the door behind me the last time, I had walked away from that part of my life. And as I stepped out into the cool night air, I knew that this time, I wasn't looking back. For the first time, I felt completely free. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, I felt more and more at peace with my decision. Lena's absence, which I had once feared, was becoming my sanctuary. It felt like I was finally catching my breath after being held underwater for so long. The noise, the manipulation, the emotional roller coaster, it all faded into the background. I had time to rediscover myself, to focus on what truly mattered. I could hear my own thoughts again, without her voice drowning them out, and for the first time in a long time, I felt clarity. I kept my distance from her, as I had promised myself. The messages came, of course, but they didn't faze me anymore. At first, she tried to keep it light, casual check-ins, texts that seemed innocent but carried an undertone of desperation. I didn't respond. I didn't know her anything. The truth was, I didn't need her anymore. I had learned to stand on my own, and that was something I was proud of. As time went on, I met new people, started doing things I hadn't done in ages. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in months, maybe even years. Life was full again. I started spending weekends hiking, traveling to places I'd always wanted to visit, and having spontaneous adventures. I was doing things for myself, things that made me feel whole again. I no longer felt like I was living in someone else's shadow. But one night, A few months later, I received another message from Lena. This time, it was different. It wasn't an apology, nor was it the usual message asking for another chance. This one was simple, but it carried weight. It read, "I need to talk. Please." I stared at the message for a long time, torn between curiosity and the cold reality of everything I had been through. I could feel the old temptation creeping in, the urge to pick up the phone and ask her what she wanted, to give her one more shot at explaining herself. But I knew better now. I had learned that if I answered, it would only drag me back into the same destructive cycle. She would say anything to pull me back in, to make me feel guilty for walking away. But I wasn't the same person I was when I first met her. I was stronger now, and I wasn't going to let her pull me back into her web of manipulation. I debated ignoring it, deleting the message, and moving on. But something inside me wanted to know what she had to say. Maybe it was the need for closure I didn't get when I walked away. So, against my better judgment, I replied, "What is it, Lena?" It didn't take long for her to respond. "Can we meet? I need to explain." I took a deep breath. The old part of me, the part that had once cared so deeply for her, wondered if I should meet her, hear her out, and maybe find some closure in the process. But then I thought about how much I had grown, how much I had changed since that last encounter. I had no desire to go back to the past, no desire to let her rewrite the story the way she wanted. Still, I agreed to meet her. But this time, it was on my terms. No more games, no more manipulation. I was going to hear her out, but I wasn't going to let her pull the strings like she used to. I wasn't going to be that person anymore. I was done being the one who was always trying to fix things that were beyond saving. We met at a small cafe downtown. It was a place I had been to a few times on my own, a quiet spot where I could think, away from the noise. I got there early and sat at a table by the window, my back to the street, so I could see her approach when she arrived. It didn't take long before I saw her standing outside, looking around nervously. She was wearing a simple black coat, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked different, like she hadn't been sleeping well, like she was carrying some kind of weight. It was strange seeing her like this, after everything that had happened. She finally walked in, and for a brief moment, I almost didn't recognize her. She had always been so confident, so in control, but now there was something fragile about her. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes as she walked toward me, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I felt bad for her or if I was just relieved that I had gotten out when I did. When she sat down, she didn't speak right away. She just stared at the table for a long time, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like she was trying to hold on to something. After a few minutes, she looked up at me, her eyes red from what I assumed were tears. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I've been a mess. I know you don't owe me anything, but I need you to understand something." I raised an eyebrow, my interest piqued, but my guard still firmly up. "Go ahead." She took a shaky breath, clearly trying to gather herself. "I've been seeing a therapist. I've been working on myself. I realized that I didn't just mess things up with you. I messed up my life. I've been running from my own problems for so long that I didn't even see what I was doing to you, to us. And I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I can't undo the hurt I caused." I sat there, listening to her words. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to forgive her. But the truth was, I had already forgiven myself. I had already moved on. And I wasn't going to let her pull me back into a relationship that had always been about her, never about us. "Lena," I said calmly, "I don't need your apology anymore. I've already forgiven you. I did that months ago, but I've also forgiven myself for staying as long as I did. And that's something you can't fix. You can't change the past, but you can change your future. And I hope you do. But I'm not part of it." For a moment, she just sat there, staring at me, the weight of my words sinking in. She didn't argue, didn't try to convince me otherwise. She just nodded, her lips trembling slightly as if she was fighting back tears. "I understand," she whispered. And just like that, it was over. No more apologies, no more tears, no more manipulation. The closure I hadn't even known I needed was finally here, and it was freeing. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in months. I didn't need her validation, her forgiveness, or her approval. I had already found all of that within myself. I walked out of the cafe, the weight of the past finally lifted from my shoulders. And as I stepped into the world outside, I knew that I was no longer the person who had let her control me. I was free. The next few days felt surreal. It was as if I had shed a part of myself I didn't even realize was there. The old doubts, the constant second-guessing, the feeling that I was never enough, they were all gone. I had walked out of that cafe feeling like a new person, someone who had finally reclaimed his own power. The feeling of freedom was exhilarating, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was truly at peace with myself. I kept going about my life, focusing on what mattered. I worked harder than I ever had before, pushing myself to new limits. My career was thriving, and I was gaining more confidence every day. The friends who had supported me during the toughest parts of the breakup became even more important to me. We spent weekends together, sharing laughter, stories, and making new memories that had nothing to do with the past. It was the kind of life I had almost forgotten was possible. One afternoon, a few weeks after that meeting with Lena, I was sitting on my balcony, enjoying a cup of coffee and the warmth of the sun. The sky was clear, the air was fresh, and everything felt in its right place. I was content, completely and utterly content. I had learned to embrace this new chapter, one where I was no longer defined by anyone else's actions or expectations. I was simply me, free to be who I truly was, without the weight of manipulation or the shadow of past mistakes hanging over me. That evening, as I was leaving the office, I ran into someone I hadn't expected. Her name was Emily, a woman I had met a few weeks ago at a mutual friend's party. We had shared some light conversation, but it had never gone beyond that. But something about her smile, the way she genuinely seemed interested in what I had to say, stuck with me. After all the heartbreak, the lies, and the emotional strain of my past relationship, I hadn't even thought about dating again. But now, standing in front of Emily, something felt different. "Hey," she said, her eyes bright with a friendly curiosity. "You're Walt, right? From the party a while back?" I smiled, feeling an unexpected spark of excitement. "Yeah, that's me. Emily, right?" She nodded, her face lighting up. "I was hoping I'd run into you. I've been thinking about that conversation we had. Would you be interested in grabbing a coffee sometime? I know a great place down the street." I paused for a moment, surprised by how quickly my heart began to race. But this time, it wasn't out of fear or insecurity. It was excitement. The kind of excitement that came from the prospect of something fresh and new, something I had never allowed myself to experience before. "I'd like that," I said, my voice steady. "How about tomorrow?" As she smiled, we exchanged numbers, and I walked away from that moment with something I hadn't had in a long time. Hope. Hope for the future, hope for new beginnings, and most of all, hope for the kind of love that wasn't based on games or manipulation. It was a clean slate, and it felt like the beginning of something beautiful. The next few weeks were filled with laughter, shared experiences, and the joy of getting to know someone without the baggage of the past. Emily was genuine, kind, and patient. She didn't play games, didn't make me feel like I had to earn her affection. She simply liked me for who I was, and that was more than I could have ever hoped for. As time went on, I realized that the most important thing I had gained from everything that had happened with Lena was the lesson of self-worth. I had spent so long trying to prove myself to someone who didn't deserve it. But now, I had learned to value myself. I had learned that I didn't need anyone's approval to feel complete. One evening, after a particularly wonderful dinner with Emily, we walked along the river, the cool breeze making the moment feel just right. We stopped at a bench, and as I looked at her, I realized how far I had come. This was real. This was the kind of connection I had always dreamed of, honest, open, and without the fear of being manipulated or controlled. As we sat there, her hand found mine, and I squeezed it gently, feeling grateful for everything that had led me to this point. The past, with all its pain, had shaped me into someone stronger, someone who knew what he deserved. And now, as I looked ahead, I saw nothing but possibilities. "I'm glad I met you," I said softly, my voice filled with sincerity. She smiled, leaning in just slightly. "I'm glad too." For the first time in a long while, I knew that everything was exactly as it was meant to be. I had faced my demons, I had walked away from what was toxic, and now I was walking towards something beautiful. The past was behind me, and the future was bright. And as I sat there, with Emily by my side, I realized that this was what real happiness felt like.